They had everything: wealth, power, a mansion that could fit a city block. But there was one thing this billionaire family could not buy: sleep. Their 6 little twins cried through every night. No nanny lasted more than a week. The house was drowning in exhaustion. Until one day, a poor black maid walked in, and what she did next changed everything. Welcome back, dear friends. Or if you're new here, this is a channel where we tell emotional, real-life inspired stories filled with twists, heartbreak, and inspiration. Today's story is about a desperate billionaire, sleepless nights, and an ordinary woman with extraordinary love. She wasn't rich. She wasn't famous. But her simple act turned a house of chaos into a home of peace, and proved that sometimes the greatest miracles come from the most unexpected people. Hit the like button if you believe love is more powerful than money. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because we have many more incredible stories you won't want to miss. Tell us in the comments, what would you do if 6 babies cried every night with no end in sight? And don't forget to share this video with someone who believes in the power of compassion. Stay with me until the very end, because the way the story unfolds will warm your heart and leave you speechless. Let's dive in. The Anderson estate stood majestically against the night sky of Newport Beach, California. Its windows lit up like sleepless eyes that never closed. Inside those walls of Italian marble and noble wood, silence was a luxury that had not existed for 6 months. The constant sound of children crying echoed through the corridors, punctuated only by the hurried footsteps of nurses and specialists who came and went without being able to solve the problem that was consuming the Anderson family. Liam Anderson, at 35, had built a financial empire that spanned 3 continents. His decisions moved millions. His words were heard in boardrooms around the world, and his presence commanded respect wherever he went. But in front of his 6 twin children's cribs, he felt completely helpless. Since the death of his wife Isabella during childbirth, the children, Olivia, Jack, Ava, Noah, Isabella, and Mason, simply couldn't sleep through the night. Mr. Anderson, the voice of Mrs. Eleanor Davies, the housekeeper who had served the family for nearly a decade, cut through the tense air of the office. She was a woman in her late 50s, always impeccably dressed, with gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, and blue eyes that had once been beautiful, but now carried a hardness that years of service and an unrequited passion had carved. Dr. Miller just left. He says the children are physically healthy, but Liam looked up from the financial reports he couldn't focus on. Reading his aristocratic features were marked by exhaustion, his dark brown hair disheveled, and the green eyes that Isabella had once compared to emeralds now seemed like dull stones. He suggested it might be emotional, the absence of their mother. Evelina hesitated, knowing that touching on that subject was still like poking at an open wound. Perhaps they miss her in a way we don't yet understand. Liam closed his eyes, pressing his temples. 6 months. 6 months since Isabella had left, leaving him not only a widower, but father of 6 babies who seemed inconsolable. He had hired the best nurses, the most renowned specialists, tried everything from classical music to alternative therapies. Nothing worked. It was almost 3 o'clock in the morning when Liam decided to make his usual nightly rounds to the children's rooms. He expected to find the night nurses unsuccessfully trying to calm the endless crying. Instead, an unprecedented silence hung over the upper floor of the mansion. Intrigued, he followed the marble hallway to the children's main bedroom, his steps silenced by the Persian rug. The door was ajar, and through the gap he glimpsed a scene that left him completely still. In the center of the king-size bed he had had installed to accommodate all the cribs together, when the children seemed calmer near each other, lay a young woman he recognized as one of the newer maids. Her light brown hair was spread over the pillow like a golden halo under the soft light of the bedside lamp, and around her like petals of flower. The 6 twins slept soundly. Olivia, with her golden curls just like her mother's, had a small hand resting on the woman's arm. Jack, always the most restless, was curled up against her side, finally at peace. Ava, Isabella, Noah, and Mason were spread out around her, all breathing in the serene rhythm of true sleep, something Liam hadn't seen in months. The young woman was also asleep, her lips slightly parted in a faint smile, as if even in a dream she knew she had accomplished something extraordinary. She couldn't have been more than 22 or 23, and Liam realized he had barely noticed her before. She was just one more among the dozen employees who kept his house running. How long did he stand there watching that impossible scene? He couldn't say. He just knew that for the first time in 6 months, his children were sleeping like angels, all because of a maid whose name he didn't even know. When he finally moved away from the door, Liam felt a confusing mix of relief and something he couldn't name. The next day, there would certainly be explanations to give and questions to ask. The dawn brought the return of reality. Liam woke up more rested than he had been in months. The silence of the night had allowed him a few precious hours of sleep, but along with the relief came the need to establish order. He was a man of rules, of well-defined hierarchies, and what he had witnessed a brave. Night before disturbed the carefully maintained balance of his home. At 8 o'clock in the morning, he summoned all the employees for a meeting in the Grand Hall. It was an unusual but necessary practice. The staff gathered information from the gardeners to the housekeepers, all aware that something important was about to be said. Last night, Liam began, his voice echoing through the high walls of the hall. There was a breach of protocol. His eyes scanned the faces in front of him until they invaded. She was at the back of the group, her head down, her hands clasped in front of her navy blue uniform. "Miss Clara Williams, sir," she answered in a low voice, finally raising her eyes to meet his. Liam felt an inexplicable start as he saw her eyes. They were a warm, almost golden brown, and carried a genuine kindness that contrasted dramatically with the calculated coldness he was used to in his business world. "Miss Williams," he repeated, and noticed how she trembled slightly at hearing her name pronounced by him. "You were hired to clean this house, not to play mother with my children." The silence that followed was as heavy as lead. Clara felt the blood drain from her face, the humiliation burning in her cheeks around her. She could feel the stares of the other employees, some compassionate, others clearly pleased with her downfall. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Anderson," she managed to say, her voice trembling. "I was cleaning the children's room, and they were crying so much. The nurses had gone out to get some medicine, and I couldn't leave them like that. And so you decided you could do better than trained professionals." The coldness in his voice cut like a blade. Liam knew he was being cruel, but he needed to reestablish the boundaries. The scene from the night before had affected him in a way he couldn't understand, and that deeply bothered him. Evelina Davies watched the scene with thinly veiled satisfaction. For years she had harbored feelings for Liam that were never reciprocated. First it had been Isabella who captured his heart, and after her death she had waited patiently for him to turn to her. After all, who else knew that house, that family like she did? The idea that a simple maid, a girl who was too young and beautiful for her own good, could somehow touch the heart of Liam or his children was unacceptable. "If I may, Mr. Anderson," Elena intervened, taking a step forward. "I believe it would be prudent to make it clear to all employees that each one should stick to their designated function. We can't have people overstepping boundaries, especially when it comes to the children." Clara bit her lower lip, fighting back the tears that threatened to overflow. She had grown up in an orphanage on the outskirts of Los Angeles, had worked since she was 16 to support herself, and this job at the Anderson estate was the best she had ever managed to get. She couldn't afford to lose it, but she also couldn't completely regret what she had done. The memory of the 6 little faces finally at peace was worth any humiliation. "You're right, Elena," Liam agreed, noticing how Clara's shoulders slumped even more. "Miss Williams, consider this a warning. Any further interference will result in immediate termination." "Yes, sir," Clara murmured, a tear finally escaping and rolling down her cheek. "Everyone can go back to work." Liam dismissed the group, but his eyes remained on Clara for a moment longer than they should have. There was something about her, a fragility mixed with silent strength that intrigued him against his own will. As the employees dispersed, Evelina approached Liam. "You did the right thing," she said, her hand briefly touching his arm. "These young girls, sometimes they don't understand their place." Liam nodded distractedly, but his thoughts were divided. On one hand, Evelina was right. Hierarchies existed for a reason. On the other hand, for the first time in 6 months, his children had slept peacefully, and it had been thanks to a simple maid whom he had publicly humiliated. Clara spent the rest of the morning cleaning the ground floor bathrooms, her tears mixing with the water in the bucket. Every time she passed the main hall, she could feel the whispers and glances of the other employees. Some were of pity, but many were of malicious satisfaction. She was new here, still trying to find her place, and now she had become an example of how not to behave. During lunch, sitting alone at the staff cafeteria table, Clara could barely touch her food. The events of the morning replayed in her mind like a broken record. But whenever she closed her eyes, she saw again the serene faces of the 6 babies finally resting. Evelina watched Clara from across the cafeteria. Her blue eyes narrowed in satisfaction. The message had been clear. A maid should never forget her place. But a small knot of worry was forming in her stomach. She had seen how Liam looked at the girl. There was something in his gaze that she couldn't decipher, and it bothered her more than she wanted to admit. Meanwhile, in his office, Liam tried to focus on his business, but found his thoughts repeatedly returning to the scene of the night before. There was something almost magical about the way Clara had managed to calm the children, something that thousands of dollars in specialists had failed to achieve. Perhaps it was just a coincidence, he told himself. Maybe the children were finally adapting to the loss of their mother. But deep in his heart, he knew it wasn't true. It had been Clara, with her gentle and warm presence, who had brought peace to his children, and had scared him more than any fluctuation in the stock market ever had. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel. Chapter's 3 days had passed since Clara's public humiliation, and the Anderson estate had returned to its state of constant agitation. The twins went back to crying incessantly during the nights, and Liam found himself once again a prisoner of his own insomnia, walking through the corridors like a tormented ghost. On the 4th morning, it was Jack's desperate cry that woke him up completely. But this was not the usual cry of discomfort. There was something different, more urgent, that made Liam run up the stairs 2 steps at a time. Mr. Anderson, the night nurse, Mrs. Davies, was visibly in a panic when he burst into the room. "It's little Jack, sir. He has a very high fever, and we can't calm him down at all." Liam took his son in his arms, immediately feeling the heat that emanated from the small body. Jack, usually the most serene of the 6, writhed and cried with a heart-wrenching intensity. His tiny fists were clenched, his little face red and wet with perspiration. "Have you called Dr. Miller?" Liam asked, trying to keep his voice steady as he gently rocked his son. "Yes, sir, but he's on his way to another emergency call." "It could be at least an hour," the nurse replied, clearly distressed. An hour? To Liam, it seemed like an eternity. Jack continued to cry, a high-pitched and desperate sound that made the other 5 twins also stir in their cribs. The room quickly turned into a chorus of cries that echoed through the walls. It was then that Liam saw Clara appear at the door, her hands holding the cleaning products she had dropped when she heard the commotion. His shadow eyes widened at the sight of the scene, and without a second thought, she dropped everything and approached. "May I?" she asked hesitantly, reaching out her hand for Jack. Liam, desperate and exhausted, handed his son to her without questioning. Clara held the baby with a natural ease that surprised everyone in the room. She nestled him against her chest and then almost instinctively began to hum a soft melody in Spanish, a lullaby she had learned from one of the few kind employees at the orphanage where she grew up. Aurora Minor Ms. Aurora Pedaso de my Corazon. Her voice was low, almost a whisper, but there was something hypnotic about the melody. Gradually, Jack's cry began to subside, his small fists unclenched, and he snuggled against Clara as if he recognized in her a source of comfort he had long been looking for. Liam watched in silence, fascinated. Not only had Jack calmed down, but the other 5 babies had also stopped crying, as if Clara's song were a magical force that pacified everyone. That song, Liam murmured almost to himself. What does it mean? Clara, still rocking Jack, who was now dozing peacefully, translated softly. "Sleep, my boy, sleep, my son. Sleep, little piece of my heart." For a moment, the room was in complete silence, except for the children's soft breathing. Liam felt something stir inside his chest, an emotion he hadn't experienced in a long time. Gratitude, perhaps, or something deeper that he wasn't ready to name. "Thank you," he said, his voice softer than Clara had ever heard. It was the first time he had addressed a word to her that was not cold or reproachful. When Dr. Miller finally arrived, he found Jack sleeping peacefully in Clara's arms, his fever already starting to drop. The doctor, a middle-aged man with decades of experience, examined the baby carefully. Curiously, "The fever is going down," he observed, frowning. "What did you do differently?" Liam looked at Clara, who remained silent. "Miss Williams managed to calm him down," he admitted reluctantly. Dr. Miller looked at Clara with renewed interest. "Do you have experience with children, young lady?" "Not professionally, doctor," Clara replied modestly. "But I grew up taking care of the younger babies at the orphanage." "Interesting," the doctor murmured, making some notes. "Sometimes what these children need isn't medicine, but human connection. They lost their mother too early. Maybe they respond better to a genuine maternal presence." Dr. Miller's words hung in the air like an uncomfortable revelation. Liam felt his jaw clench. The idea that a maid could offer something he with all his resources could not provide for his own children was simultaneously humiliating and revealing. After the doctor left, an awkward silence filled the room. Clara was still holding Jack, who was sleeping soundly, but she could feel the tension emanating from Liam. "I should," she began, preparing to return the baby and leave. "Stay," Liam said abruptly, surprising himself until he wakes up to make sure he's okay. Clara nodded, carefully, settling into the armchair next to Cribs. Liam remained standing, watching her. For the first time, he really saw her, not as an employee or an inconvenience, but as a person. He noticed the delicacy of her movements, the way she instinctively adjusted the baby for greater comfort, the way her eyes softened when she looked at the children. "Where'd you learn that song?" he asked, breaking the silence. "From Carmen, one of the caregivers of the orphanage," Clara replied softly. "She was from Madrid. She used to sing to calm the younger children during storms. She said that labbies were like bridges between the heart and the soul." Liam felt something tighten in his chest. "You grew up in an orphanage." It wasn't a question, but Clara nodded anyway. From age 3 to 18, St. Jude's in East L.A. Liam knew the place. He had made occasional donations to various charities, including that one. The irony did not go unnoticed. One of the children he had indirectly helped was now taking care of his own children. "And your parents?" "I never met them," Clara replied without apparent bitterness. "Carmen used to say that sometimes God puts children in places where they can learn to take care of other children, that it was my calling." The raw simplicity and acceptance in her response left Liam momentarily speechless. He had grown up with every imaginable privilege, but also with the constant pressure to meet expectations. Clara, on the other hand, had grown up with nothing, but carried an inner peace that he secretly envied. For the next 2 hours, they remained in companionable silence. Liam watched as Clara alternated between rocking Jack and whispering soft words to the other babies when they stirred. It was like watching a natural dance, a harmony that seemed impossible to teach. When Jack finally woke up, he was visibly better. His fever had broken completely, and he even managed one of the rare smiles that lit up the faces of the Anderson twins. "You have a gift," Liam said as Clara prepared to leave, finally handing Jack back to him. Clara blushed slightly. "They're just children who need love, sir. There's not much mystery to it." As she headed for the door, Liam called her again. "Clara," she turned, surprised that he had used her first name. "What you did tonight was extraordinary." "Thank you." A small, genuine smile lit up Clara's face. "Anyone would have done the same, sir." But as she left, Liam knew that wasn't true. Not everyone would have done the same, and certainly not everyone would have achieved what she had. In the days that followed, a strange pattern began to emerge. The twins, who had experienced an occasional night of sleep since the incident with Jack, began to systematically refuse to sleep unless Clara was present. Not only that, they seemed to recognize her voice, her footsteps, even the soft lavender scent she wore. Evelina Davies watched this evolution with growing discomfort. For years, she had been the unofficial maternal figure of the house, the person Liam turned to for domestic matters, and she secretly hoped for emotional consolation. Seeing Clara naturally taking on that role with the children awakened a toxic mix of jealousy and resentment in her. "It's worrying," she commented to Liam one morning as they reviewed the household schedule. "The children are becoming excessively dependent on this maid. It's not healthy." Liam, who had spent another night semi-conscious listening to the intermittent crying that only ceased when Clara appeared for her morning tasks, considered Evelina's words. She was right about the dependency, but he also couldn't ignore the fact that his children were clearly better when Clara was around. "Perhaps we should consider expanding her responsibilities," he suggested hesitantly. Evelina felt her stomach clench. "Mr. Anderson, with all due respect, she's a maid without proper training. Taking care of children, especially 6 babies, requires professional experience. But it's working, Evelina. For the first time in months, there's peace in this house." "Temporarily," Eleanor insisted, her voice carrying a hardness that Liam rarely heard. "And what then? When she gets tired of this novelty, when she decides she can use this influence over the children to gain advantages. Young people like her are opportunistic by nature." Liam frowned. "That's a bit harsh, don't you think?" Eleanor realized she had revealed too much of her true feelings and quickly moderated her tone. "Forgive me, sir. It's just this house has already suffered a great loss. We can't let the children get attached to someone who might leave at any moment." The observation hit a sensitive spot. The loss of Isabella was still an open wound in Liam's heart, and the idea of his children going through another painful separation made him hesitate. That afternoon, as Clara cleaned the library, Liam appeared unexpectedly. She was alone organizing books on one of the highest shelves with the help of a ladder when she heard his voice. "Clara!" She was so startled that she almost lost her balance, being forced to hold on tightly to the bookshelf. "Mr. Anderson, I didn't hear you come in." "Sorry for scaring you," he said, but his eyes were already scanning her delicate form on the ladder, the curve of her legs under the uniform skirt, the way her hair escaped her ponytail and framed her face. He quickly looked away, disturbed by the direction of his thoughts. Clara came down from the ladder, smoothing her uniform and trying to look presentable. "Is there something you need, sir?" "Actually, there is." Liam hesitated, Evelina's words echoing in his mind. "About the children. They seem to have developed an attachment to you." Clara lowered her eyes, fearing another lecture. "If my presence isn't causing problems." "No, that's not it." Liam ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Clara had noticed he made when he was nervous or insecure. "It's the opposite. They sleep better when you're around. But it worries me that this might be problematic for you." "What do you mean, sir?" "Well, you were hired as a maid. Taking care of children wasn't part of your responsibilities. If this situation is becoming too demanding..." Clara interrupted him softly. "Mr. Anderson, can I be honest?" He nodded, intrigued by the seriousness in her voice. "I grew up without a family, without knowing what it was like to have someone truly care about me. When I see your children, 6 little miracles who only need love and security, I can't just ignore them. It's not a burden for me. It's almost as if it's what I was born to do." The raw sincerity of her words hit Liam like a punch to the stomach. He had grown up assuming that love was something that was given in a measured, calculated way, always with conditions and expectations. But Clara spoke of love as if it were as natural as breathing. "What if..." He began, then stopped, recognizing that he was about to cross a line that Evelina had clearly marked as dangerous. "What if something happened? If you decided to leave the house, the children would be devastated." Clara looked him directly in the eyes, and Liam felt as if she could see through all his carefully constructed defenses. "Mr. Anderson, may I ask why you assume I would leave?" The question caught him off guard. Well, people move on. They find better opportunities. And you think I see your children as a stepping stone to something better." The sadness in her voice was unmistakable. "That I would pretend to care for them, to gain some kind of advantage." Liam realized he had just repeated almost word for word the suspicions that Evelina had planted in his mind. Looking at Clara's hurt face, he felt a deep shame. "No," he said finally. "No, I don't think that. Forgive me." A silence stretched between them, heavy with tension and misunderstandings. Clara went back to work, but but her hands trembled slightly as she reorganized the books. "Clara," Liam said softly, if you were willing, I would like you to consider a change in your responsibilities. You would still take care of the cleaning, but also help with the children when necessary. There would be a salary increase, of course." Clara stopped what she was doing. Her back still turned to him. What does Mrs. Davies think of this idea? The question revealed that she had noticed the underlying tension, the domestic politics that were rarely discussed openly. Liam realized that he had underestimated Clara's intelligence. Evelina has her concerns, he admitted, but the decision is mine. Clara turned slowly. "And what is your decision, Mr. Anderson?" Liam looked at her. Really? Looked at her for the first time since she had entered his house. He saw a young woman who had grown up with nothing but possessed a wealth of compassion that he envied. He saw someone who loved his children without a hidden agenda, without expectations of reciprocity. He saw perhaps the answer to a prayer he didn't even know he was making. "My decision," he said slowly, "is that you are exactly what this family needs." Chapters 8. The change in Clara's responsibilities did not go unnoticed by any member of the Anderson state staff. Over the next 2 weeks, a palpable tension settled into marble corridors. Evelina Davies, in particular, watched the young woman's every move with a hawk's eyes, looking for any sign of presumption or error that she could use to reverse Liam's decision. Clara, in turn, felt the weight of those stares at every step. She strove to maintain her impeccable conduct, arriving earlier, staying later, and meticulously dividing her time between her traditional cleaning tasks and caring for the twins. The difference in her salary, although modest, represented more financial security than she had ever experienced, and she had no intention of wasting this opportunity. The children flourished under her divided attention. Their sleep patterns became more regular, and for the first time since Isabella's death, the estate knew consistent periods of nighttime peace. Liam, finally able to sleep a few full nights, found that his ability to concentrate on business had returned, and his quarterly profits reflected this recovery. It was on a rainy Thursday in October that Evelina decided to implement her plan. Clara had just put the twins down for their afternoon nap and was heading to the library to complete her daily cleaning when Evelina intercepted her in the corridor. "Miss Williams." The housekeeper's voice cut through the air like an icy blade. "I need to speak with you." "Of course, Mrs. Davies. How can I help you?" Evelina studied the young face in front of her, looking for signs of arrogance or presumption, but finding only the respectful courtesy that Clara always maintained. This annoyed her even more. It would be so much easier if the girl were obviously unsuitable. "I received some concerns from other members of the staff," Evelina began, choosing her words carefully. "About your new position in the house?" Clara felt her stomach clench, but she kept her expression serene. "What kind of concerns?" "Well, some feel that there has been a very rapid elevation in your status here." "Just 3. Months ago you were a beginner maid, and now," Eleanor gestured vaguely. "Some question whether you truly understand the appropriate boundaries." "Boundaries?" Clara repeated, genuinely confused. "With Mr. Anderson, with the children." Evelina took a step closer, her presence intimidating. "This is a grieving house, Miss Williams. Mr. Anderson lost a wife he loved deeply. The children lost their mother. It wouldn't be appropriate. If someone tried to fill a void that shouldn't be filled." The implication was clear, and Clara felt the blood drain from her face. "Mrs. Davies, if you're suggesting that I have inappropriate intentions, I'm not suggesting anything," Evelina interrupted coldly. "I'm simply reminding you of your position. You are an employee, a temporary employee. In fact, people in your situation sometimes confuse professional kindness with something else." Clara fought to maintain her composure, but Eleanor's words echoed her own secret fears. Because, if she were honest with herself, there were moments when Liam thanked her with that rare half-smile, when he lingered watching her with the children when their hands accidentally touched during diaper changes, that she felt something more than simple professional respect. "I understand your concern," Clara said finally, her voice firmer than she felt. "But I can assure you that my only concern is the well-being of the children." Eleanor smiled, but there was no warmth in the expression. "Good to hear. Now, About this afternoon, Mr. Anderson is expecting some important associates for dinner. It will be necessary for you to remain discreet. He wouldn't want his guests to see an employee taking care of his children as if she were what? Liam's voice cut the tension of the corridor like a heated blade. Both women turned, startled. Liam was standing at the end of the corridor, his green eyes shining with an expression Clara had never seen. Something between surprise and a cold, controlled rage. Mr. Anderson. Evelina recovered quickly, her tone returning to impeccable professionalism. I was just discussing the arrangements for dinner tonight with Miss Williams. Arrangements? Liam repeated the word, but his eyes were fixed on Clara, who was visibly upset. What kind of arrangements exactly required you two to look like you were having such an intense discussion? An awkward silence stretched through the corridor. Clara looked at the floor, her cheeks red with humiliation, while Evelina tried to formulate a response that wouldn't reveal the true nature of her conversation. Actually, Liam continued, taking a few steps toward them. I was looking for Clara. The twins woke up from their nap, and Olivia is particularly agitated. Could you? Of course. Clara replied quickly, grateful for the escape. She hurried toward the stairs, but not before hearing Liam address Evelina in a voice she had never heard him use before. Evelina, my office now. In the office, Liam carefully closed the door before turning to face Evelina. The housekeeper maintained her erect and professional posture, but there was a tension in her shoulders that revealed her nervousness. 20 years, Liam began, his voice low, but charged with authority. You've been in this house for 20 years. You've served my family with distinction, and I've always respected your judgment, and I appreciate that trust, Mr. Anderson. Then perhaps you can explain to me why I just found you intimidating an employee in my own hallway. Evelina stiffened. I wasn't intimidating anyone. I was simply what? Because from what I could tell, Clara seemed genuinely distressed, and you seemed to be enjoying it. The accusation hung in the air between them. Evelina felt her careful self-control begin to fragment. With all due respect, Mr. Anderson, perhaps your perspective is compromised when it comes to that girl. Compromised? Liam repeated, his voice dangerously low. You lost your wife less than a year ago. It's understandable that gratitude for the help of the children might be mistaken for stop. The word cut the air like a whip. Stop right now. Eleanor fell silent, realizing she had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. My feelings, whatever they may be, are my own business, Liam continued, his voice controlled but furious. But I'm going to make one thing very clear. Clara is not just any employee. She brought peace to my children when no specialist could. She works more hours than anyone else in this house without complaints, without expecting recognition. And if you can't see the value in that, maybe it's time to reevaluate your own position here. The silence that followed was charged with 20 years of unspoken history, of unexpressed expectations, of an unrequited love that Evelina had secretly nurtured for so long that it had become part of her identity. I understand, she said finally, her voice colder than the marble of the walls around them. I will make your position clear to the rest of the staff. See that you do, Liam replied. And Evelina, if I find out that Clara is being treated with anything less than complete respect by any member of this house, there will be consequences. After Evelina left, Liam went to his office window, watching the meticulously manicured gardens that stretched as far as he could see. For the first time, he was forced to confront the truth he had been avoiding. His feelings for Clara had evolved far beyond professional gratitude. When exactly had it happened? Maybe it was the moment he first saw her sleeping with his children, looking like a guardian angel. Or maybe it was on the morning she sang to Jack, her voice carrying more healing than any medicine. Or it could have been in any of the dozens of small moments since then. The way she smiled when she thought no one was looking. How her eyes lit up when the children laughed. How she unconsciously bit her lower lip when she was concentrated on a task. But recognizing his feelings and knowing what to do with them were two completely different things. He was a 35-year-old man, a widower, a father of 6 children, a billionaire with responsibilities that extended far beyond his own happiness. Clara was a 23-year-old woman who had grown up with nothing, who depended on him for her livelihood, who trusted him as an employer. The power difference between them made any romantic advance ethically questionable, no matter how genuine his feelings were. And yet he couldn't deny that he felt more alive in the last few months than he had felt since Isabella's death. Meanwhile, in the children's room, Clara tried to process her conversation with Elenina as she calmed Olivia, who had woken up crying from her nap. The little one immediately snuggled against her, her small fists clutching Clara's uniform as if she feared she might disappear. "It's okay, little one," Clara murmured gently, rocking the baby. "I'm here." But Elenina's words echoed in her mind. People in your situation sometimes confuse professional kindness with something else. Was it true? Had she mistaken Liam's growing courtesy, his more frequent thanks, the moments when he lingered to talk about the children, with something more significant? The possibility made her feel foolish and presumptuous. Of course, a man like Liam Anderson, educated, wealthy, sophisticated, would never see a former orphan maid as anything more than a useful convenience. She had allowed her own emotional needs to color her perceptions, creating romance where there was only pragmatism. Olivia finally calmed down, and Clara gently placed her back in the crib. When she turned, she found Liam standing at the door, watching her with an expression she couldn't decipher. She calmed down quickly, he observed, entering the room. "Yes, I think she just needed a little attention," Clara replied, suddenly self-conscious. After her conversation with Eleanor, every interaction with Liam seemed loaded with hidden meaning. "Clara," he said, approaching slowly, "about what I witnessed in the hallway." She quickly shook her head. "Please, Mr. Anderson, it's not necessary. Mrs. Davies was just clarifying some things about my position here. She's right to be concerned about the upkeep of the property." Liam frowned. "What kind of clarifications?" Clara hesitated, struggling with the divided loyalty between honesty and the desire not to create more conflict in the house. "Just appropriate boundaries. What's expected of someone in my position, and what exactly did she say was expected?" The intensity in his voice made her look at him directly, and for a moment Clara saw something in his eyes that made her question all her assumptions about his feelings. There was a genuine concern there, but also something deeper, something that made her heart beat dangerously fast despite all her efforts to keep it under control. "That I should maintain a proper professional distance," she said finally. "That sometimes people in situations like mine can misinterpret kindness." Liam felt a cold fury ignite in his chest. "And do you think you misinterpreted something?" The final question hung between them like an unexpressed confession. Clara felt as if she were on the edge of a cliff, one step from the safety of her carefully controlled perceptions or one step towards completely unknown territory. She began, then stopped, lost in his green eyes that seemed to be asking the same question she was afraid to answer. Before either of them could say anything more, the sound of crying from multiple children echoed through the room. The other 5 twins had woken up simultaneously, as if they felt the emotional tension in the air. "Work calls," Clara said quickly, grateful for the interruption that saved her from having to navigate emotional waters she didn't feel prepared for. Liam watched as she moved efficiently between the cribs, calming each child with a natural competence he had learned to admire. But now, watching her, he saw more than competence. He saw grace, genuine kindness, and a beauty that went far beyond the physical, a beauty of spirit that he had almost forgotten existed in the world. And for the first time since Isabella's death, Liam Anderson allowed himself to admit the truth. He was falling in love. The realization should have scared him. Instead, for the first time in months, he felt truly alive. Chapter's 3 weeks had passed since the confrontation in the hallway, and the atmosphere at the Anderson estate had become electrically tense. Elenina maintained a glacial courtesy with Clara, fulfilling the letter of Liam's instructions without embracing their spirit. The other staff, sensing the change in dynamics, tiptoed around, uncertain about where their loyalty should lie. Clara, in turn, found herself in an impossible state of constant emotional turmoil. The mutual confession of feelings with Liam had irrevocably changed the dynamic between them. Every casual encounter was charged with unresolved tension. Every conversation about the children became a delicate dance around deeper emotions that neither of them knew how to properly navigate. The children, as sensitive as they were to the emotional changes around them, had become clingier with Clara, as if they instinctively knew that something important was at stake. Olivia, in particular, had started crying whenever Clara left her sight, extending her tiny arms towards the only maternal figure they knew. It was on a particularly cold November morning that Ella Lenina finally played her last card. The children had been invited to a special performance at the local elementary school. Liam announced during breakfast, reading the elegant letter that had been delivered that morning. It's a charity initiative they organize. Annually, local families present their children in small musical and theatrical numbers. Ella Lenina, serving coffee with her usual efficiency, commented, "It will be an excellent opportunity for the children to socialize with others in the area, although of course they are still too young to actively participate." "Actually," Liam continued, his eyes meeting Clara's across the table, "the letter mentions that families with babies are welcome and that there's a tradition of lullabies being presented. I thought that maybe if Clara was willing, she could sing to the children as part of the presentation." The silence that followed was deafening. Ella Lenina almost dropped the coffee pot, while Clara felt her face flush. Mr. Anderson, I don't know if that would be appropriate," Clara stammered. "I mean, I'm just an employee. You are the person who brought music back to this house," Liam interrupted gently. "And the children respond to your voice in a way that, well, it would be a shame not to share it with other people who could benefit." Ella Lenina quickly composed herself, but her voice carried a coldness that cut like ice. "Mr. Anderson, with all due respect, public presentations of this type are usually family-oriented. I don't know if it would be understood why an employee would be representing the Anderson family." The observation hit Clara like a punch to the stomach. Of course, Ella Lenina was right. How could she, a former orphan who cleaned bathrooms, represent one of the most prominent families in Newport Beach? But Liam leaned forward, his eyes fixed on Eleanor with an intensity she had rarely seen. "Ella Lenina, let me clarify something. Clara would not be representing the Anderson family as an employee. She would be representing the children as someone who cares deeply about them." The pause before someone who cares was charged with unexpressed meaning, and everyone in the room felt it. Clara looked between Liam and Ella Lenina, realizing she was at the center of a much bigger battle than the simple question of a school performance. Eleanor watched her with eyes that gleamed with barely contained resentment, while Liam looked at her with an expression that made her heart beat dangerously fast. "I would like to think about it," Clara said finally, getting up from the table. "If you'll excuse me, the children must be waking up." As she left the room, Ella Lenina and Liam remained silent for a long moment. "You're playing with fire," Ella Lenina said finally, her voice low but charged with warning. "What do you mean?" "You know exactly what I mean." Ella Lenina leaned across the table. "Liam, I met you when you brought Isabella home as your fiancée. I saw how you loved each other. I saw how she died having your children. And now I see you looking at a girl who has half your life experience. As if she were. As if she were what, Ella Lenina?" "As if she were Isabella," Ella Lenina finished, her words sharp as a blade. "But she's not, Liam. Isabella was educated, sophisticated from your social class. This girl, no matter how sweet she is, she's an employee. An orphan without formal education, without a family, with nothing but a pretty voice and a maternal instinct." Liam slowly stood up, his imposing height making Ella Lenina involuntarily step back. "You're right," he said, his voice controlled but furious. "Clara is not Isabella. Isabella was wonderful, and I loved her deeply. But Clara is something completely different. She is strength disguised as delicacy. She is wisdom without arrogance. She is love without conditions or expectations." "And you think she loves you back?" Ella Lenina asked cruelly. "Or do you think she just sees an opportunity to drastically improve her life situation?" The question hit Liam like a shot, because it was exactly the fear he had been trying to suppress. How could he be sure that Clara's feelings, if they existed, were genuine when he literally controlled her livelihood? "That," he said finally, "is something I'll have to find out for myself." That afternoon, Clara found herself in the mansion's sunroom, a glass-enclosed extension that Isabella had built, and had offered a view of the gardens even during the coldest months. The children were napping, and she had taken a few minutes to herself, a rare luxury in her increasingly busy days. She was leafing through a book of poetry she had found on one of the shelves when she heard footsteps behind. "Her, I found you," Liam said, his voice carrying a lighter tone than she had heard recently. Clara turned, closing the book. "The children are sleeping. I thought I'd enjoy a few minutes of quiet." "Elizabeth Barrett Browning," he observed, noticing the book in her hands. "Romantic poetry," Clara blushed. I found it in the library. I hope you don't mind." "Of course not. What's your favorite poem?" The question caught her by surprise. There's one that has always touched me." She hesitated, then opened the book to a page that had clearly been read many times. Sonnet 4. "How do I love thee? Let me count the ways." Liam recited from memory, making Clara look at him in surprise. "You know it. It was Isabella's favorite, too," he said, but without the pain that usually accompanied mentions of his late wife. "Although I suspect you too appreciate it, for different reasons." Clara closed the book, suddenly uncomfortable. "Maybe I should choose another reading." "Why?" "Well, it's not appropriate for someone in my position to read about that kind of love. It's too grand, too far beyond anything I could ever hope to experience." Liam approached, his eyes fixed on her face with an intensity that made her feel simultaneously exposed and protected. "Why do you say that?" "Because it's true," Clara replied simply. "People like me, we are grateful for what we have. We don't dream of great loves or great passions. We dream of security, of purpose, of perhaps being useful to someone." "What if I told you that you're wrong?" Liam asked softly. "What if I told you that you deserve exactly the kind of love Elizabeth Barrett Browning wrote about?" Clara felt her heart stop. "Mr. Anderson, Liam," he corrected. Just Liam. The way he said her name, soft, intimate, charged with meaning, made Clara realize they were getting dangerously close to territory for which there would be no return. "I can't," she whispered. "You know I can't." "Why? Because you work for me? Because you came from an orphanage? Because Ella Lenina said you should keep your distance?" He took another step closer. "Or because you really don't feel anything but professional gratitude?" The final question hung between them like an unexpressed confession. Clara looked into his green eyes and saw not only the powerful man who was her employer, but also vulnerability, hope, and something that looked dangerously like love. "I do feel," she admitted finally, her voice barely a whisper. "God help me. I feel much more than I should." Liam felt as if the air had been sucked from his lungs. "Clara, but that doesn't change anything," she continued quickly, taking a step back. "You're Liam Anderson. You have more wealth than I can imagine. You have 6 children who need a proper maternal figure. You have a reputation to maintain." And her voice broke slightly. "I'm an orphan who cleans bathrooms for a living. Do you think that's what I see when I look at you?" Liam asked, his voice full of disbelief. "It's what the world will see. It's what Ella Lenina sees. It's what any sensible person would see." Liam reached out his hand, gently touching her face. Clara involuntarily leaned into the touch before she realized what she was doing. "When I look at you," he said softly, "I see the woman who brought peace to my children when nothing else worked. I see someone who sings lullabies in Spanish and can make Jack stop crying with a fever. I see someone who reads poetry in the sunroom and finds beauty in small things. I see someone who grew up without love and yet has so much love to give that she lights up any room she enters." Tears began to form in Clara's eyes. "Liam, you don't understand. I have nothing to offer you." "You have everything," he replied, his voice fierce with conviction. "You have yourself, and that's more than any wealth I could ever possess." For a moment, Clara allowed herself to believe. She allowed herself to imagine a world where such differences didn't matter, where love was enough to overcome social conventions and expectations. But then reality returned like a cold wave. "And your children?" she asked. "They deserve someone who could be a real mother to them, someone educated, refined, appropriate for their social position." They deserve someone who loves them unconditionally, Liam replied. Someone who will sing to them when they're sick, who will make them feel safe and loved. Someone exactly like you. Before Clara could answer, the sound of footsteps echoed through the sunroom. They moved away from each other quickly, but not fast enough. Ella Nina was standing at the entrance, her blue eyes gleaming with a mix of triumph and something that looked dangerously like hate. "I apologize for the interruption," she said, her voice dripping with fake politeness. "But the children woke up and are asking for Clara." "Of course," Clara replied quickly, grateful for the excuse to escape the emotional intensity of the moment. She walked past Ella Nina without making eye contact, but she could feel the housekeeper's eyes burning into her back. After Clara left, Ella Nina turned to Liam with an expression he had never seen before, something between disappointment and fury. "So, this is how it's going to be?" she asked. "What do you mean, Elena? Are you really going to humiliate Isabella's memory by falling for an employee?" The accusation cut deep, but Liam felt more anger than guilt. Isabella's memory cannot be humiliated by me finding happiness again. She would have wanted me to be happy with someone appropriate. Eleanor insisted, with someone who could honor the legacy she left behind. Clara honors that legacy every day. Liam replied coldly. She loves Isabella's children as if they were her own. She brought joy back to this house. Isabella would have adored her. Ella Nina felt something break inside her. 20 years of secret hopes of unrequited love, of believing that maybe someday he would turn to her as something more than a loyal employee. "Then you've made your decision," she said, her voice dangerously calm. "About Clara?" "Not yet, but about the kind of man I want to be, the kind of father I want to be for my children. Yes, I have." Eleanor nodded slowly. "I see. Then I hope you're prepared for the consequences." "What consequences?" But Ella Nina was already leaving Liam with a dark premonition that the battle for the soul of his house was just beginning. What do you think of the story? Let me know in the comments, and tell me which city you're watching from. Chapters. The tension at the Anderson estate had reached a boiling point. In the days following the confrontation in the sunroom, Ella Nina moved through the house with a sinister energy, her plans taking shape in the shadows of the corridors she knew better than anyone alive. Clara, in turn, found herself in a state of cautious happiness. The mutual confession of love with Liam had changed everything. The glances they exchanged were now charged with promise. Conversations about the children became intimate and domestic, and there were stolen moments in the corridors where he would touch her hand, or she would straighten an imaginary crooked tie just to be close to him. But Ella Nina's shadow hung over all of this, like a storm cloud. It was on a particularly cold December afternoon that Ella Nina finally played her most elaborate card. Clara was in Liam's main bedroom, a territory she normally avoided, but which she had been forced to clean due to the absence of another employee who had fallen ill. The room was magnificently decorated, dominated by a king-size four-poster bed and dark mahogany furniture that spoke of generations of family wealth. On the dresser in a prominent position was a small jewel that Clara had noticed many times during her cleanings, a sapphire and diamond brooch that she knew had belonged to Isabella. Liam kept it there as a kind of memorial, a tangible reminder of the love he had lost. Clara had always given the brooch a respectful distance, carefully cleaning around it without ever touching it. But that day, as she polished the marble surface of the dresser, her sleeve happened to brush against a small piece. The brooch slid from the smooth surface and fell to marble floor with a sound that echoed through the room like a gunshot. Clara immediately knelt down, her hands trembling as she examined the jewel. To her distress, she realized that one of the small prongs holding one of the diamonds had come loose, and the precious stone had rolled under the bed. "No, no, no," she murmured to herself, crawling on the floor in a desperate attempt to find the lost diamond. Her hands frantically searched the carpet, her eyes filled with tears of panic. That's how Ella Nina found her, on her hands and knees on the floor of Liam's room, Isabella's brooch clearly damaged in her hands. "My God!" Eleanor exclaimed, her voice full of carefully rehearsed shock. "What have you done?" Clara looked up, her face pale with terror. "It was an accident," she stammered. I was cleaning and my sleeve brushed against it. I was trying to find the diamond that came loose. Evelina approached, her eyes fixed on the damaged jewel. Do you know what this is? It's Mrs. Anderson's brooch, Clara whispered. I know how much it means to Mr. Anderson. Please let me explain. Oh, you will explain, Evelina said, her voice taking on a tone of false concern. But not to me. Before Clara could protest, Evelina was yelling down the hallway. Mr. Anderson, please come quickly. The sound of running footsteps echoed through the marble corridors. Liam burst into the room, his eyes immediately fixing on the scene. Clara kneeling on the floor, tears streaming down her cheeks, Isabella's brooch clearly damaged in her hands. The silence that followed was deafening. Liam, Evelina said softly, I'm so sorry. I arrived and found, well, you can see for yourself. Liam looked from Evelina to Clara, his face an indecipherable mask. Clara could see his emotions fighting shock, pain, and something that looked dangerously like disillusionment. It was an accident, Clara said desperately, struggling to stand up. Please, you have to believe me. I would never do something like this on purpose. Of course, it was an accident, Evelina said with false kindness. No one is suggesting it was intentional, but the fact remains that one of Mr. Anderson's most precious memories was damaged. While it was in your care, Liam slowly approached, reaching out his hand for the brooch. Clara handed it to him with trembling hands, watching his face twitch slightly when he saw the extent of the damage. Isabella wore this at our wedding, he said, his voice low and controlled. It was her grandmother's. Irreplaceable. I know, Clara whispered. I know how much it means to you. Please let me pay for the repairs. I can work without pay until I cover the cost. Cover the cost? Evelina interrupted, her voice full of disbelief. My dear, this is a family heirloom, an antique. You can't just fix something like this. Liam continued to look at the brooch, his emotions a storm of pain, loss, and confusion. The jewel represented so much. His life with Isabella, the memories of happier times, the continuity of family traditions he wanted to pass on to his children. Perhaps, Evelina continued, her voice assuming a tone of reluctant authority, it would be best if Clara took a few hours to compose herself. Maybe she should go home early today. No, Liam said abruptly, making both women look at him. No, she's not leaving, Elena frowned. Liam, considering the circumstances. The circumstances are that there was an accident, Liam interrupted, his voice gaining strength. An unfortunate accident, but an accident. Nonetheless, he turned to Clara, who was standing there like a child, awaiting punishment. Can you give me your word that it was genuinely accidental? Yes, Clara answered immediately, her voice firm despite the tears. Liam, I would never. You know, I would never. I know, he said softly, and the two words carried more weight than any elaborate speech. I know who you are, Clara. Evelina felt the ground move under her feet. This was not the result she had planned. Liam should be furious. He should be questioning Clara's character. He should be recognizing that she was unsuitable to be near his most precious things. Liam, she tried again. Surely you must recognize that this raises questions about responsibility and suitability. The only questions it raises, Liam interrupted, his voice becoming colder, are about why an employee was cleaning a room alone that normally requires two people, and why such delicate items were not properly secured. Evelina felt the blood drain from her face. Are you suggesting this is my fault? I'm suggesting that accidents happen when people are overworked and when proper precautions aren't taken. Liam turned to Clara. Are you okay? Clara nodded, still trying to process the fact that he was not only not firing her, but apparently defending her. Then let's get back to work, Liam said. And Evelina, in the future, I want you to make sure that valuable items are properly protected during cleaning. This kind of accident should never have been possible. As Liam left the room, Evelina stood there watching Clara with an expression of pure hatred that made the young woman involuntarily step back. This isn't over, Evelina whispered, her mask of professionalism finally slipping. You may have fooled him for now, but I know girls like you, opportunist manipulators, and I will prove it." Clara felt a shiver of fear run down her spine. For the first time since she arrived at the Anderson estate, she realized that she was in real danger, not just losing her job, but becoming the victim of a personal vendetta that went far beyond simple professional protectionism. That night, after putting the children to bed, Clara headed to the sunroom, hoping to find a few moments of peace to process the day's events. Instead, she found Liam already there, standing in front of the large windows that offered a view of the moonlit gardens. "I thought I might find you here," he said without turning. "Around? You're not mad at me?" Clara asked, her voice small. Liam turned, and in the soft light of the garden lamps, Clara could see that his face held weariness and something that looked like deep sadness. "For an accident?" he asked. "No. Clara, I'm not mad about that." "Then why do you look so upset?" Liam sighed, running a hand through his hair, a gesture Clara had learned to recognize as a sign of internal stress. "Because I realize I put you in an impossible position," he said. "Finally, the tensions in this house, the hostility you're facing. It's because of me. It's not your fault that people don't like me. It's not a question of them not liking you." Liam approached, his green eyes intense in the soft light. "It's a question of them seeing what I feel for you and reacting to it." Clara felt her heart race. "Liam, I try to keep my distance," he continued, his voice low and intense. "I try to convince myself that what I feel is just gratitude or loneliness or anything else I could rationalize. But today, when I saw you so distressed, so scared that I might think badly of you, I realized that this goes far beyond anything rational." "What are you saying?" Liam took another step closer, his presence filling all the space around her. "I'm saying that I'm in love with you, Clara Williams. Completely, irrevocably in love." The words hung in the air between them like a confession that changed everything. Clara felt tears filling her eyes, not of sadness, but of an emotion so intense it had no name. "Me too," she whispered. "God, help me. I'm in love with you, too." Liam reached out his hands, gently touching her face. "So, what do we do?" "I don't know," Clara admitted, leaning into his touch. "There are so many obstacles, like what other people will think, how Evelina feels, how society will react." Liam shook his head. "Clara, I've spent months trying to please other people, trying to be what everyone expected of me. And what has that brought me? A house full of tension and children who only find peace in the arms of a woman. I was trying to keep at a distance because of social conventions. What if we're wrong? What if this is just proximity, need, circumstances?" Liam silenced her doubts by leaning in and gently touching his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle, hesitant at first, then growing in intensity as both of them recognized the truth of their feelings. When they parted, both were breathless. "This doesn't feel like circumstances to me," Liam murmured against her lips. Clara laughed through her tears. "No, it doesn't." "Then let's stop fighting it. Let's see where it takes us. And the others, Eleanor, what will people say?" Liam pulled her closer, his arms wrapping her in a protection she had never experienced before. "Let me deal with Evelina and anyone else who has a problem with it. You're the woman I love, the woman my children love. That's all that matters." For the first time since she arrived at the Anderson estate, Clara allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, an orphan could find her happy ending in the arms of a prince. But in the shadows of the corridor, Evelina watched, her plans already taking new shape. If she couldn't destroy Clara through sabotage, she would find another way, because 20 years of unrequited love had hardened her heart beyond any possibility of forgiveness. And she knew secrets about the Anderson family that even Liam himself didn't. Suspect secrets that could change everything. Chapter's winter had arrived in Newport Beach with an unusual intensity, covering the Anderson estate gardens with a blanket of snow that transformed the property into something out of fairy tale. But inside the stone walls, the atmosphere was far from magical. Evelina had become a somber presence, moving through the house with a sinister energy that made the other employees whisper in dark corners. Clara, in turn, existed in a state of cautious happiness. The mutual confession of love with Liam had changed everything. The glances they exchanged were now charged with promise. Conversations about the children became intimate and domestic, and there were stolen moments in the corridors where he touched her hand, or she adjusted an imaginary crooked tie just to be close to him. But Ella Nina's shadow hung over all of this like a storm cloud. It was on a particularly cold January morning that Ella Nina finally played her last card. Clara was in the children's room, humming softly as she changed Olivia, when she heard raised voices coming from Liam's office. It was unusual. Liam rarely raised his voice, and when he did, it usually meant something serious was happening. Curious and worried, Clara put Olivia in the crib and discreetly headed to the corridor. The voices became clearer as she approached the office. "I can't be silent about this anymore." Ella Nina's voice echoed through the partially closed door. "It's my moral obligation to this family." Moral obligation about what exactly? Liam's voice was tense, controlled, but Clara could detect an underlying current of irritation about the true nature of this girl you're allowing to take care of your children. Clara felt her stomach clench. Whatever Ella Nina was planning, it was clear it was directed at her. Clara's true nature. "Ella Nina, what the hell are you talking about?" "I did some investigating." Ella Nina continued, her voice taking on a tone of false reluctance about her past. "St. Jude's orphanage. Liam, did you know she was removed from there not on her 18th birthday, but at 16? Clara felt the blood drain from her face. How had Ella Nina found that out? "And why does that matter?" Liam asked, but Clara could detect a new tension in his voice. She was removed for inappropriate behavior with one of the older staff members, a scandal that the orphanage tried to quietly bury. "That's a lie," Clara whispered to herself, her hands trembling against the corridor wall. "There's more," Ella Nina continued relentlessly. "She worked in 3 different homes before coming here. In each one, there were incidents, always involving men from the family, always resulting in her quick and discreet termination. The silence that followed was deafening." Clara could imagine Liam processing this information, questioning everything he thought he knew about her. "Where did you get this information?" Liam asked finally, his voice dangerously low. "I have contacts," Ella Nina replied evasively. "The important thing is that now you know the kind of person you've allowed into your home near your children." "Stop." The word cut the air like a blade, charged with an absolute authority that made even Clara shudder in the corridor. "Liam," I said, "stop." There was a pause, then the sound of footsteps. "Ella Nina, in 20 years of service, you have never disappointed me as much as you have in this moment." "Disappointed you, Liam? I'm trying to protect you and your family." From what?" "From a woman who brought peace to my children. From someone who works more hours than anyone else in this house without complaining. From a person who clearly loves my children as if they were her own." Clara felt tears starting to form in her eyes. He was defending her even in the face of accusations that she knew contained distorted grains of truth. But the evidence, what evidence? Rumors and gossip from people neither you nor I know. "Ella Nina, you're talking about a girl who grew up in the same orphanage my family has donated thousands of dollars to over the years. A place we know for its reputation for caring for abandoned children, not for raising whatever you're insinuating." There was a long pause. Then Ella Nina said, her voice colder, "So you choose to believe her over me?" "I choose to believe what I see with my own eyes," Liam replied. "And what I see is a woman who loves my children, who works tirelessly for this family, and who for some reason I can't understand. You've decided to turn into an enemy. She is my enemy because she is a threat to everything I've worked to protect in this house." The words escaped before Ella Nina could stop them, revealing more of her true feelings than she intended. "Protect," Liam repeated, his voice full of sudden perception. "Or control." The silence that followed was charged with 20 years of unrecognized tension, of unfulfilled expectations, of a love that had soured into possessiveness. "Eleanor," Liam said finally, his voice softer but with no less authority, "I think it's time for us to discuss your position in this house." Clara didn't wait to hear the rest of the conversation. With her heart beating wildly, she ran back to the children's room, where she found the 6 children awake and starting to make noise for their morning feeding. Mechanically, she began to prepare the bottles, her hands trembling slightly. Evelina's accusations echoed in her, mind mixed with painful memories she had tried to bury. It was true that she had left the orphanage at 16, not 18, but not for inappropriate behavior. It had been because the director, a middle-aged man with wandering hands, had become too insistent, and when she refused to give in to his demands, he had fabricated reasons for her removal. And yes, there had been problems in previous jobs, but always because she refused to accept unwanted advances from men who saw a young orphan as easy prey. Each termination had been humiliating. Each change a struggle to find a safe place. But how could she explain that to Liam? How could she make him understand that every accusation from Evelina was a cruel distortion of the truth? She was so absorbed in her thoughts that she didn't notice Liam entering the room until he spoke her name softly. Clara. She turned, her hand still holding one of the bottles, and saw immediately in his eyes that he had noticed her presence in the hallway during the discussion. You heard, he said. It wasn't a question. Clara nodded, unable to find her voice. Liam approached slowly as if she were a frightened animal that might run away at any moment. So, you know what Evelina is saying about you? The things she said. Clara began, then stopped, struggling to find the right words. They're not completely lies, but they're not the truth either. Then tell me the truth, Liam said simply. And Clara told him about the orphanage director and his wandering hands, about the bosses who thought an orphan should be grateful for any attention, no matter how unwanted, about the whispered accusations when she refused to give in, about being called a provocator and an opportunist when all she wanted was to work honestly. In every place, she finished, her voice broken. I was just a girl trying to survive. But when you don't have a family, when you don't have anyone to stand up for you, people make up stories. And the stories always make you look guilty. Liam listened to everything in silence, his eyes never leaving her face. When she finished, he reached out and gently took the bottle from her trembling hands, setting it aside. Clara, he said softly, do you think I don't know who you are? I don't know anymore, she whispered. Evelina made everything sound so sordid. Evelina sees what she wants to see. Liam interrupted. But I see you. I see you at 3 o'clock in the morning, singing to Jack when he has a fever. I see you sharing your own lunch with the lost kitten you found in the gardens. I see how you treat every person in this house, from the gardeners to the most important guests, with the same respectful courtesy. He moved closer, his hands framing her face. I see a woman who grew up without love and yet overflows with love, who faced betrayal and abuse and yet chooses to trust, who could become bitter and cynical, but instead became gentle and generous. Liam, I love you, he said firmly. I love your strength, your vulnerability, your enormous heart. And if Evelina or anyone else has a problem with that, it's their problem, not ours. Clara felt tears overflowing. But for the first time in days, there were tears of relief and gratitude. What happens now? She asked. Now, Liam said, pulling her into his arms. We stop letting other people dictate our future. Do you love me? Yes. And I love you, and the children adore you. That's all we need to know. Before Clara could answer, a crying sound echoed through the room. The 6 twins, as if sensing the emotional tension in the air, had started to get agitated simultaneously. Work calls, Clara said, but she was smiling through the tears. Then let's go to work, Liam replied. Together. As they moved in sync through the room, each picking up a child, Clara felt a peace she hadn't experienced in weeks. This was her family, not by blood or marriage, but by choice, by love, by the simple decision to take care of each other. Evelina could have all the plans she wanted, but she couldn't change the fact that Clara had found her place in the world in the arms of a man who saw her for who she truly was. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel. Let me know which city you're watching from, and share it with someone special. Have you ever had to choose between accepting less than you deserve or fighting for your dreams? Tell us your story in the comments. Your courage can inspire others never to give up on true love.